Hello and welcome to the Alexandra Wenman show. I'm very excited to have my guest with me today. I want to introduce you to Stephen Morallee.
That's me.
And I love the name because he's morally very good. So Stephen you're an artist and a depth coach, but can you just tell our viewers a little bit more about what that means?
Yeah, the depth coach part is interesting. I'm very interested in depth. Depth for me is what it's all about. I had an experience about 15 years ago with a man called Kishi, this Japanese man who did a body of work called Sei-Ki. And something happened, I won't go into it now, it's a very long story, but it opened up this capacity to essentially bridge between these two worlds, the world of the everyday, the surface, what I would call, and depth, where most of us go in our meditation practices, or when we just go to that space of stillness and infinite possibility. So for me, that engagement with depth was about how we could bring it to the surface of our lives, to desire, to play, to appetite, to the real world, sex, food, money, bodies. That was what was most interesting to me. Because it was possible to obviously disappear off down that end into bliss and then come back in quotes to the real world, but how did they marry up? And so with those, if you like, two aspects of life, something in their integration came to life. And I saw that as a realm of spontaneity and creativity. So when I call myself a depth coach, I coach people in how to integrate those three aspects. But I do it quite esoterically. So initially it was an energetic experience whereby I just sat with someone. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know how I could do this, but somehow with sitting with someone and entering into this, what I would call like a namaste in action, where there was just space. And I allowed myself to show up in depth, and it was very lucid, very, very tangible. And I found that as I sat with them, they would go into spontaneous movement and yet be able to laugh about it. They were as present as we are right now. So I saw that in this kind of coming together, there was a synergy. And in that namaste in action, it went back and forth. It wasn't me witnessing them and them wiggling around. It was a two-way conversation. And then over the years, I started to bring in a little bit more structure of support. So I would have clients that would say have issues with relationship or with work or with money. So I thought, how can we bring this three-aspect approach to something that's very specific, very tangible? And so I created this model of work called 3-aspect that I've applied across the board to a number of different practices. I'm a working artist as well. And so for me, at the heart of my practice as an artist is the interest in exploring at a personal level integration. So what that means to me, to bring the world of formlessness into form. And so my personal practice is the art, and the depth coaching is the, if you like, shared practice.
I guess the depth is sort of akin to how we view the feminine aspect, isn't it, a little bit? Like going into those deeper places, the emotional, the subconscious, the intuitive, the fluid kind of. I always see it as like the ocean depth, really, isn't it? And bringing that more out into our present awareness and our daily life.
Absolutely. That integration of the masculine and feminine is something that deeply fascinates me, beyond the gender of male or female, but just the possibilities of finding moment by moment the chance for the integration. So whether we call it yin-yang or masculine and feminine or whatever, that balance between the heat and the cold, or the form or the formlessness. But I'm an integrationist in my heart. I'm just excited by the possibilities of what can come together that's greater than the sum of the parts. That what becomes available when we explore this. And we're going to have our bias. We're going to have that place of those 3 aspects where we feel like most at home, whether because we have like a natural talent for that, or a resonance with that aspect of living, or because we've dismissed the others as not being important. That coming together so we integrate is everything for me. And so I'm exploring it across the board in my life, whether it's cooking, sex, movement, performing, whatever it is, it's about how do I bring those 3 elements together.
Amazing, it's gorgeous. So how did it all start for you? Like, how did you begin this whole, I guess, what should we call it, awakening process on a personal level?
Oh God, how long do we have? When I was 15, I had a very big experience. I was pulled back from a really dangerously speeding car, a hand on the left shoulder, and I turned around first of all annoyed that someone had touched me, and then I realised the car was there, and obviously there was no one I could see, and I could still feel the hand to some degree if I go back there. And after that, pretty much everything opened up at a visual level, at an internal sense.
How old were you in that?
50.
15 years old.
Yeah, so that was kind of the big jolt. And then there were a series of events. I started to explore Reiki back in 2001, and I was drawn to it. And prior to that, I'd had all this sensitivity. My mum is Egyptian, and in the family, my great-grandmother, her name was Rose, and she was a big healer in Egypt.
Amazing.
So in the female line of my family, they've all been healers. And my dad's a Yorkshireman and doesn't kind of get more on the other side of the spectrum. So a real genius, but very cerebral, atheist, kind of a genius, and also not interested in this aspect of life. And so in that kind of integration, there was something arising. And so I had an interest, a very strong interest in, if you like, alternative therapies. I'd received them a lot myself. The idea of me doing them just wasn't something there, until one day in a yoga class this voice said, oh, this is what you're going to do. And I'd already flirted with my first Reiki teacher's work, and I knew that was not how I would want to practice if I was to do it. I mean, properly out there at the level of leaving clients totally indebted and just all kinds of
sometimes you
practice.
have to see how you don't want to be, though, don't you, for you to kind of be steered onto the path that you do want to take.
Absolutely, it was invaluable in that respect, but it was glaringly invaluable. For all my lack of experience, I knew there's no way I could
how
ever
not
have
to be a
anything
spiritual teacher.
Exactly, like from day one it was so clear. And so I went on a very interesting path with Reiki, and I took my teacher level with William Rand, and I knew at the time that there was something in it for me, but I also knew that the way that most people were being taught it, and the way that I was expected to teach it, as the idea that something from outside of us would be channeled through us, out of the hands and poured into this poor bugger that was deficient in something, and we would save the day with this
That's
universal
the danger,
energy.
isn't it? But if you focus on the deficiency, you're actually expanding it, giving it power, right?
And dependency, the idea that this other person's going to fix you. So as much as I recognised, I had been a practitioner for about 2 years, incredible stuff was taking place, and there was all the physiological markers of Reiki with the heat and the cold and everything, but I knew instinctively that I wasn't putting anything into them, that I was bearing witness. That for me, Reiki was very much about bearing witness. And with the subsequent research I've done to recognise Usui's, actually his Buddhist origins and the Tibetan Buddhist origins of the work, that the nature of the entire philosophy is that Buddha nature is within you. This wasn't something lacking. And so it just seemed quite obvious at the time, even though most of my peers were teaching a modality where something was being popped into someone else to save the day. I knew that wasn't how I saw things. And so as I was teaching, I felt a small conflict because it wasn't the standard model. And yet with my students, I was having them consider the fact that perhaps they were bearing witness to an innate capacity for their own Reiki to be unblocked, to not be so
it's
stagnant.
like a harmonising within yourself, isn't it? And it's just
Exactly.
helping that to be. I think when the healer as the witness, it's like we're just bearing witness really to an unfoldment, aren't we? And the minute it's like they do say, you know, even in quantum physics, that it's the observation of the particles that makes the particles change. And so if we are looking at something or a healing through a lens, I always say I look at it through a lens of unconditional love, which means a lens of no judgment. So even if you're aware there's an injury, you kind of see it as already potentially healed, whole and perfect, and already like the highest of what it could be, and then that allows everything to harmonise back to that blueprint. I think that's the key, isn't it?
Absolutely. And so when that was kind of, if you like, churned up in my system, especially with the provocation of starting to be a teacher and saying, well, wait a second, this isn't what I resonate with, Then, this was back in 2003, I started to become quite dissatisfied. And to cut an extremely long story very, very short, I found my body was going into a lot of spontaneous movement. At the beginning of 2003, whilst I was dissatisfied with what was going on for me with Reiki, and a brilliant man called Erez Yardini, a very good friend, a unique shiatsu practitioner, whenever he did work on me, all this release would start to come through. Very lucid, and yet at the same time, very powerfully spontaneous. He directed me to a woman called Alice Wilden, who was running the UK side of the Sei-Ki kind of community. And once again, I went into all this movement. She said, we love this, come to this workshop.
But it's amazing because what happens on a physiological level during healing, it's not always logical, it's not always rational, and we're not all the same either, are we? So what did you discover about this movement that was unfolding in you?
Well, I trusted it. I'd be in yoga classes, and just a regular yoga class, I'm not thinking about anything, and I could feel it coming on, and there would be this sense of awkwardness, because half the yoga teachers would generally go, oh my god, this is amazing, you're having a kriya, this is fantastic, and the other half would be like, could you please not do that? It's very distracting.
Yeah. Or like, are you possessed?
This is the thing, they thought I was wanting a bit of attention, I don't know, at the end of a class. And so there was a part of me that felt like, what is this? It's a small liability, but I trusted it. And it was semi-voluntary, so it was very hard to stop it. So finding a community where there were people that said, actually, we can work with this. This is a release, was a relief in one respect. So I did his workshop, and at one point I volunteered to be a guinea pig for one of the methods he was describing, and it lasted 45 minutes. What should have taken 2 minutes. And there was an opening that took place, and then I had a private session with him a few days later. And what was unusual was that it's such a remarkable body of work, Sei-Ki, in terms of the body goes into a spontaneous movement to release, and I was already bored within about 10 minutes, and I was like, yeah, been there, done that. And yet it was a remarkable thing. I thought, wow, the hell are you so bored already in 10 minutes? And within about 20 minutes of lots of movement, something else happened. And it's very hard to describe it, but it wasn't Sei-Ki that was happening at that moment. I was already starting to vocalize spontaneously, and a very, very masculine voice that was me came through, Eastern European language. And I looked around the room like I was looking at it for the first time, very much present still. And then all kinds of things started to happen. Kishi was watching from the side, and because in Sei-Ki, when they facilitate some kind of expression, they back off. They let you do the movement. So I was watching him, watching me, and all this language came through, and various things happened. And it left me with this ability to somehow bridge the most lucid, ordinary element of life, what I call the first aspect, with this infinite stillness, this space. And then the quality for me, it's different for everybody, but the quality for me is spontaneous expression. And so over the course of the next, I suppose, 3 years, I must have done about 1,500 sessions, because I tried to transplant it across to my my existing healing practitioner client list. And whilst I was very excited to see that people were having very powerful experiences at the healing level, I knew there was more to it than that. It wasn't simply like if you had a bad back, then the back got better and then back to normal. I thought, wait a second, this is just the beginning. This connection to one's, what I would call deep intelligence, seems to be the beginning of the journey, not the end of the journey. And what impact could that have at the level of creativity, at the level of passion? And so that really moved me into wanting to support people, to coach them in what was possible in their life. Not just at the higher end. I work with a lot of artists, and I work with a lot of people, a lot of healers I work with. So not just those of us that are working in this field, but people that just wanted to start to bring a greater depth to the everyday, whether they're bankers or accountants. Quite often I would have bankers come through word of mouth, big guys that had never taken a vitamin pill, let alone a yoga class, and they go, I'm here to let you know this is a load of crap. That was their opening gambit. And I was like, come in. Exactly.
Let me get my hands on you.
Absolutely, because they were often the ones that would pop like that. They would sit down, and then we'd go into connection, and they'd be wiggling around like this, and I'd be speaking a language through them, and they'd look at me winking back like, yeah. And I loved it. There was just such a playfulness. And sometimes the opposite. Those spiritual seekers and yogis that are like, I love this work so much, it's amazing. And they would sit there like this. not moving a muscle,
No.
everything
Wow.
locked down because
So
there was such a
sometimes
story.
Complete juxtaposition.
Because
Wow.
they were so stuck in the story of what should be or shouldn't be.
What they should look like and present themselves like, or
that they were tightly, and eventually there'd be a loosening.
there's so much fun in what you do. I love
my
it.
God.
It's
Every
like the
single time.
the freedom of it.
Completely.
Yeah.
I mean, that said, I mean, it's been over 15 years I've been practicing. I often did not follow my own advice. The advice was just notice what arises. So they'd be completely, if you like, free and in an open space. I was like some demented Goldilocks in my head.
Oh my God.
Too hot, too cold, they're not moving, oh, they're moving too much. And then my ego just had to feel safe, that it could mouth off. Because if I had worked with one client and they'd had some big release, I wasn't doing anything.
No.
I was present and bearing witness. So my ego, bless it, was terrified that the next time someone would come in, nothing would
It
happen.
wasn't going to work.
And so, I mean, I know a lot of other practitioners can relate to this
Yeah.
when they have created their own body of work.
Yeah.
It's very common to feel like a
You're
fraud.
like, oh my God, is it working? Are they feeling it? Is it happening?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you have no idea what facilitated it in the first place. So
Yeah.
the ego it's not like you're a dentist and you can say, okay, I drilled that hole
There you go,
and I
you've got
filled it in.
filling.
We don't have that when we're working to bring through new work. We're not even working, it comes through. And so I know for you brought through, you channeled your own work. It doesn't come with the instruction manual. So in a way, it's remarkable that we keep putting one foot in front of the other. But in many respects, we of course have a choice, but we don't have a choice.
Yeah.
We know it's what our heart has been calling out for from so early on. And so for me, it would often be somewhat stressful until somehow I got the right balance of them moving or not moving. And then after I could laugh at myself and say, you're the only one in the room not actually doing this.
Yeah.
And yet miraculously somehow it still worked, which showed it wasn't the ego that was required to do something. So it was a very humbling path for me. And it was only relatively recent, probably the last 5 years, that I'd say I've actually been able to relax during the sessions completely with someone. And like you say, everyone's different as they relate to what I would call deep intelligence, so this integration. In my experience, about 2/3 of people move. They express. Maybe half of them would move in a way that I would say is non-locally intelligent. So in my work, I speak over 120 languages, and they've been verified by people that know these languages.
Wow.
I have a sense of what I'm saying
Yeah.
in context, but not, and because of that, I can speak fast.
Yeah.
Because I'm not thinking, oh, really?
Does this
Are you
make
sure?
sense? Or what does this mean?
It just comes out.
Yeah.
In fact, when I first did it with Kishi, I was so curious as to what the hell had taken place. I said, because I had lived in Japan in this lifetime, as well as other ones, but my Japanese was shockingly bad. I think because my brain is wired for spontaneous language, I was like terrible at school with learning actual languages.
Yeah.
Same with choreography. Pretty poor at learning choreography, but I'm a good freestyle dancer. So I hadn't picked up much Japanese when I lived in Japan, and most of my work I did was in English language.
And yet you could spontaneously.
Oh, it was, and I recognised it. I said, that sounds Japanese. And I said to him, and he's Japanese, I said to him at the end, as he was trying to usher me out, once he'd seen I was okay.
What did I say?
I said, was I speaking Japanese? And he said, yes.
Did you go, I think I'm turning Japanese, I think I'm turning Japanese.
I really think so. And I said, what did I say? And he goes, I don't know. I said, why don't you know? You're Japanese. And he said, very old dialect. And I'm like, hello, this is the beginning of a conversation, not the end.
Past
He wanted
life
me out.
lingo.
So I think the
Wow.
whole thing was that it does seem, if I was a betting man, I'd say it's not channeling. It's somehow I'm able to bridge.
It's in your memory banks,
That's
isn't
the thing.
it?
It's the soul connection to all of the incarnations. And if I'm going to pat myself on the back for anything, it's that I haven't gone bonkers and I don't black out.
No.
And I think that's a really big accomplishment
Yeah, the
in my
fact
life.
that you're grounded and you're still kind of semi-present, you're kind of aware of what's going on. It's like, it is like a, I always call it like an interface, isn't it? It's like a higher aspect comes through and sort of interfaces with you as the human or the vessel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Stephen in this lifetime, 2018, whatever, 6 foot tall, half Egyptian, curly hair, that part gets to mix with a Japanese incarnation.
Wow.
And it's not, and thankfully I'm
Do
not.
you see while it's happening as well? Because for
No.
me, like when I have spontaneous past life memory, or I'm in it and I'm seeing it, and sometimes sound comes through, but I've never spontaneously spoken other languages, not to that degree anyway. But do you have visuals with it? It's more
No, I
just
think
your embodying.
I'm lucky that I don't in that respect,
Yeah.
because I can be so present with this reality, this lifetime, the person I'm with, that it's about that. But there is that underlying, I do move though, so I brought through, so in the same way I bring through language, I bring through also all these movements, these non-locally intelligent movements. So martial arts, I mentioned this to a Kundalini teacher, Dr. Morris. He was, I think he was a ninja. I can't remember what he was scary in the most wonderful way, big guy. And I let it slip that, oh yes, I think I do martial movement. And it was a very casual conversation. He goes, let's see it then.
Show me.
And I was like, yeah. And I just waited and I thought, okay, I'm sure it'll kick in. And so I stood in front of him and thankfully it did. And he identified the forms.
Amazing.
And I didn't know one form from the other. There were Tibetan forms and Egyptian forms and everything coming in. And he said, yeah, your form's good. I mean, he wasn't particularly excited in terms of like, oh my God. He was like, yeah, okay, you can do that. And I was like, yeah, well, I couldn't do that yesterday.
But did he actually grasp that you'd never done it before?
That wasn't a big part of it. I think he was just thinking like... You just
channeled this and it's actually... It's a bit like that woman, Elizabeth H, who wrote Initiation, and she talks about just spontaneously doing yoga when she was younger. It's amazing.
And I see a lot of these movements within martial traditions and yogic traditions. I see that they probably came from a similar place, a spontaneous expression of a collective relationship with deep intelligence that then people codified over time and of course refined. So there are those of us that are bringing in the new, and of course evolution requires that it's picked up by those that will then adopt it. So whoever first worked with acupuncture, thousands and thousands of years of refinement. But when you are on that edge, when you're bringing it in, then of course your ego is going to be on fire, because it's basically able to attach to it and go, ooh, I'm special. And the other side...
Or to think you're not worthy of it. That's what I've had with precious wisdom. I'm like, oh God, am I worthy of this process? Or
completely.
This,
and it's almost like the Kadeyas, intermittently like, I'm a fraud, and yes, look at me. And you're like, oh my God, how do I hold any of this together? So I felt like all of this was not too much, but it was such a challenge. And it was remarkable, the people that I would meet through word of mouth, that then would bring another dimension of what it meant to connect with a client with this. So different challenges. I had one woman with a collapsed retina that she didn't tell me she had a collapsed retina. She came in because she was kind of going in and out of paralysis about every 6 months. She would have 6 months of limited mobility and then she would be paralyzed. And she was moving like Missy Elliott by the end of the session. It was beautiful. And she was in her 60s and pretty restricted in her movement. And there was this beauty to her movement and grace. And she was this gorgeous German woman. And as she left, she went, oh, and by the way, I can see. And I went, you can see what? And she went, I can see with this eye. And I went, see what with that eye? And she was, no, I couldn't see before. It was collapsed, the retina. And I went, what? As she walked out the door, I was thinking, it was such a miracle to watch what their body's intelligence is doing. So I have zero interest in treatment, zero interest in treating somebody. I never did, and that wasn't the resonant part. And even in the Reiki days, it was still very much, no, I'm bearing witness to your remarkable capacity. And so in that context, I am in awe as to what deep intelligence, as it comes back and forth between us, makes available.
It's incredible. And also you're a performer, so you must bring... Some of this must spill over into your performance as well, right? So does that mean when we come and watch you perform, we're getting healing?
Well, I would like to think that. I hope you're getting entertained. That was the main thing. I performed at the Berghof in Germany, just across the border from Basel, with an ex-partner who was also very good with the movement work, and we'd done a lot of detail together. And a remarkable violinist called Helena Winkelmann, who was like world-class violinist. So the three of us put a piece together that was very much about spontaneous movement and detail. So in that respect, I have performed detail. But then what became very interesting was, I'm 47 now, and so there was a point...
I can't believe you're 47.
I wasn't fishing for a compliment.
Fishing for a compliment, darling.
No, it was...
Look at this beautiful face.
But 4 years ago, with a different ex-partner who's now like a soul brother, soul sister to me now, absolute best friends. And he is a remarkable voice coach, remarkable, off the scale, Gary Albert Hughes, brilliant genius with the voice, energetically and everything. But as we were a couple, I I was able to take advantage of joining his choir and his vocal classes, and even though I'd been vocalizing since 2003 with a lot of range, I never had the confidence to sing, and yet I knew it was in me. So at the time I would have been about 43, 44, and I thought, I'm 44, you know, I don't have to sit around waiting for permission. And the fact that I haven't tried, not even pretending to be some ingenue that's kind of got to this, and so something in me lit up, and under his craft, something else was able to come
that's
through.
so inspiring to hear that. You know, it's like so many people sitting there going, "Oh, it's too late for me to do X, Y, and Z." You can start at any time.
Thank you. I mean, I think one of the things with age is there's so much voodoo associated with it. So many of us have struggled.
And yet we're looking better than ever, darling.
Well, this is the thing. It's ridiculous, isn't it? Yeah. When you let go of the voodoo, the social voodoo of aging, and what it means. Because at a cellular level, that shit really hits hard. It really does not support the workings of healthy tissue. When so many of us that have experienced so much trauma to our sensitivity, no matter how sensitive we are, that nature of can we actually be ourselves beyond worthy or unworthy, and the impact that all of that heaviness has upon basically so many of us who are just in this slow suicide. And so aging is their expression of that, oh, well, once you turn, someone says to me, oh, just you wait till you turn, whatever, 30 or 35 or 40, your eyesight. I'm like, no.
Yeah, but the body regenerates. And we're supposed to regenerate. Like we shed all the cells in our body apparently every day, don't we? And then we regenerate.
So much of us is
So why are we regenerating back to wrinkly? You know what? We should be regenerating younger.
I don't know why you're pointing at yourself when you finish your fingers. You're radiant.
I'm pointing over there.
That door over there.
That's just that old wooden wrinkly door.
But that's the thing. But when we are connected like this, we get to express and live that.
Yeah.
And as we embody that courageously, so with the performance, I realized, wait a sec, there's no story here about what is or isn't. And I think turning 42 for me was when I felt like I became a man. It was strange. It wasn't 40, which is so archetypal.
I know, 40 is just odd.
But 42 for me was just, I think it's a multiple of 7. Obviously, you've got Saturn returns at 28, but there was something powerful where I felt like I stepped out from beyond permission. It was a lot shaking up in my life, and it was a brilliant time. But I figured, you know what? I can sing. I didn't think that 4 years ago. I thought I can't sing 4 years ago quite accurately. But under the craft element, one of the things I love is cabaret. Yeah. And cabaret speaks to my heart because there's no fourth wall. So it's about your relationship with the audience. And there has to be a depth of both confidence but vulnerability. And so for me, as a practice exploring depth, it discovered me at that level, and it hunted me down and said, no, commit to this. So I sing once a month at this remarkable venue in Brasserie Zedel, underneath Piccadilly.
I know Zedel. It's beautiful in there.
So Crazy Coq's, the cabaret club, which, to my knowledge, Ella Fitzgerald sang in. It's one of the best cabaret clubs in Europe, and so there's an open mic there, and the quality of performers there is off the scale. This open mic, it's on the second Thursday of every month, and we've become like a family there of support. But you've got a 3-piece jazz band on stage in one of the world's best cabaret clubs, so to cut your teeth there was something else. I didn't step there 4 years ago. I mean, I had the training from Gary, but then when you realize this is about the opportunity to put your money where your mouth is. If you're going to encourage people to step into a more passionate life, a life where you are in heart and in your deep intelligence, then you need to walk that walk. I think teachers need to step up into the practice, and that's why the artwork is so important to me. And so the performance, in that integration of the 3 aspects, when you're singing songs, because I could just bring through light language right now. That's easy. I know how to get the right notes for it. You couldn't tell
remember
me
the words and all of that.
There's no lyrics to it. Who's going to say, are you a bit off there?
Yeah, you've got to be in sync with the musicians and all of that.
The right pitch, the right tone, the right lyrics. And if you're speaking, you're remembering a script but making it feel natural. So this to me was exciting. But as is so often the case with cabaret, especially cabaret, technical excellence is not the prime thing. It's depths of vulnerability, how you engage with the audience, because it wasn't until a year ago I was performing there. I was part of a 4-person show there, and I sang Fever, the Peggy Lee song. And that was the moment when I realized, I felt the energy of the audience was co-shaping the song with me. And I felt that was when I became a singer. And so it has been the most unlikely practice, because I've got this background where I had this awakening 15 years ago, and that could have done me quite happily. I can speak all these languages and do these martial arts and support people to heal and open up their creativity.
I've got to see you in action. We'll have to do a swap or something.
Absolutely.
We'll do it.
I would love that very
it.
much.
Yeah.
But this feeling of like, no, life is to be lived right here from the heart. And if it says, you know what, give the singing a go, give it a go.
Yeah.
Why not? I mean, really, why not? Yeah. It's a really good question. Why not? If it's coming from that place. And so for me, what really became such a gift was, and this is how I know that we came to know each other through friends of yours that I know, the Fembot Oracle was something that opened so many doors for me. So in February 2017, to last...
we need to. I'm gonna.
2018.
I'll show some of the images on here so people can see.
Okay, brilliant.
Your incredible art. This is what made me get Stephen on the show to begin with. So we really need to talk about this, because it was our friend Chris and Damien who told me about you, and Damien's been on the show now. And then I went on and just had a little look at what you were doing. I think Damien showed me some of the images, and then I went on and went, wow. So how did this come about? Well, this is just phenomenal.
With all of the explorations around detail, I was moving a lot myself, and I was very interested to capture the path of my own movement. And so initially I was working with charcoal on paper, but it would splinter because I was moving so fast. So I started to do light drawings. So I'm a photographer, and so long exposure photography with a remote control and lights strapped onto the fingers and various things. And so over the years, as an artist, I was exploring the movement using things like fabric and downlighting and kids' toys like lightsabers. So
it really is like a combination of performance art and the photography and the other media that you bring in.
And it's come out of necessity, because the speed was so fast with the movement that I wanted to use technology to try and keep up with the speed, and so
capture the energy of it too, because you're clearly channeling through extraordinary vibrations when you're doing that.
This is the thing, and so photography is brilliant because it's a capture of time, and especially when it's long exposure photography, you're working with whatever, half a second's worth of that movement as expressed. So I woke up in February 2017, and I was half awake, half asleep, and I could hear my heart talking, and it literally described the entire layout of this oracle set for an hour and a half.
Wow.
And I listened, and I got out of bed, and I've heard my heart has come up with many, many great ideas before, and I've ignored them. And I didn't. I don't know why I didn't. And I don't know why I put everything else on hold for pretty much a year and a half. And I wrote down what I could remember, and I created a structure, which is this 3-aspect structure that I teach. And there's 78 archetypes, from alignment to the Empress to abundance, fortune, chaos, loss, the alchemist. They all came through as archetypes, a little map. And then I knew this was a chance to bring through this kind of mythological narrative of the Fembot that I'd been playing with for about 4 years. I'd had 2 exhibitions of similar work that I'd started to shape these creatures from my own movement, but I never kind of envisioned it beyond individual pieces. And then all of a sudden this oracle set came through. And it took me about 4 months to create the images. And so I create them by saying the name aloud, and then I'd written 5 or 6 keywords and just waited. And then my heart would whisper red, blue, green, and I'd have fabric on the floor and lights, and I would go into the movements, and I'd make these movements, and I'd push the remote control, and then I knew I was done. And let's say out of those 60 photographs for one, let's say for alignment, I then, once again, my heart would choose the images. And I created my own method of photography called 3-aspect photography, and you get the through line, 3-aspect, 3-aspect, 3-aspect. But so then working with craft, creativity and connection. So whatever the underlying, even with Reiki, I teach 3-aspect Reiki. So that same relationship between structure, spontaneity and mystery.
We're so aligned.
I think the integration is so important.
Precious wisdom has 3 aspects.
Exactly,
as well.
when you were saying that earlier. But it is interesting how we all find each other, isn't it? And this community, there's there are more and more of us out there, and I imagine with your viewers too. My final contact here. I've been so drawn to looking at you, Alex. I find it hard to talk
Sorry,
like
I'm
that.
sucking all this attention in.
But that community that's out there of us that no longer feel we need to make that choice, either or, you know, depth or the real world. And so that's what I realised the Fembot Oracle was here to support. And that's what excites me so much about it. The images.
What made you come up with the name Fembot?
Fembot narrative it picked me. I've been fascinated by AI and what impact it had. There was a TV show, Humans, not so long ago, about what would happen if they became sentient.
Gemma Chan,
And Battlestar Galactica, that's one of the main themes. There's so many films that have explored sentience and the AI experience. And so for me, using them as a mythological device to explore what it means to be human from that part of us. And so there's a whole narrative that we could talk for.
I know.
We could rate YouTube, I'm sure, in terms of their maximum for a video. And so that recognition of a story that could be told, that was kind of the theoretical side, but the reality is it's chosen me. I love Fembot in as much as it seems to be an integration of masculine and feminine. The robot represents a quite masculine vision traditionally, and the femme speaks directly to the origin story, because as humans we're all in the womb female. We mutate, some of us, to become male. So in this narrative, this mythological narrative, they're all shapeshifters extraordinaire, but they're all, if you like, feminine in origin. So there's an acknowledgement to our female origin that joins us as humans and fembots. With the fembots, they aren't attached to gender, so there's an incredible fluidity, but there is also an acknowledgement of form. And so they say, yeah, we are fembot in that respect. And there's also an acknowledgement to the immense potency. Within the Fembot Oracle, there are suits. So pieces, movements, lights, and diamonds. And they correspond, the first three, to the three aspects. So pieces relates to how we experience form in the world. So any of these major archetypes will be expressed through each of these suits, and the diamonds is the integration of the three. So I was tuning into what would be. I've got four archetypes of the child, the sage, the mask, and the femme. So when I was looking to allocate power to one of them, for me it was the femme of diamonds, not the mask of diamonds. That's where I saw the seat of power actually in the feminine. The mask of diamonds is creativity. So it was that balance between power and creativity. And so for me, there was such an excitement in mapping out this world of 78 archetypes, but more than that, the potency and the amount of love in each one to support. Now, as I
can feel the energy of it while you're talking about it. It's pretty amazing.
I can feel it with you, actually, because it's so lovely having a chance to talk about it, because it really did bring so much to life in my own life. Working with creating the images, because I was an experienced image maker, it was intense, but I was really in my element. But then I knew I had to write a text for each one. And initially I just thought, I'll just write something nice, the world is wonderful and so are you, or something like that. And I started to write through, it wasn't quite that bad, but I was writing something that I just thought, it just has to do the job. And then I got to the Five of Lights, which is loss. And I wrote from my heart, and what I wrote really moved me. I had an experience on Sunday where a friend of mine, his mother had lost her husband, and we did a Fembot Oracle work together, and she just at the end of a detail session, she chose 2 of the oracles completely off of my iPad with no description of anything underneath, and she'd never seen them before. And she chose loss as one of them, and I was astounded because she was obviously still in deep grief. And I read the text to her, and I cried afterwards. She had cried hearing it, but I cried because it was so incredible. It was like I'd written it for her. And that was actually the one, loss was the one that I realised, oh my God, I can write. And then I went, oh shit, I can write. Which meant I had to go back to the other 25 and I had to make each one of those feel like it came from had to come from my heart.
It's like channeling it through your higher self, isn't it? Really putting the emotion into it. It's amazing, because that was the question I was going to ask you, is do you bring those images into session with people, or do you use them as part? Yeah.
I think what's interesting is I finished the 78 images and the 78 texts in the space of about 8 months of working solid on them. The writing took longer, I had 8 drafts essentially of the writing, until each one absolutely sang to me and had the same energetic impact, or same depth of energetic impact as the images did, so they accompany each other. And then I thought, oh great, I'm just going to write the intro. Well, that'll take me a day or so. It took me a year.
Wow.
And in fact, in the process of making the intro, I ended up making a 25 video, 11-hour photography course.
Wow.
Which actually, this is a benefit of that 3-aspect photography, but the reason I think I did that was to help me write the introduction to the Fembot Oracle.
Yeah.
To shift my focus onto working with people at a level of how do I reach out to an audience? How do I reach out to what people actually need or where their pains are? And to support them at that level. So to put one's hat in the ring with such vulnerable work that comes, it is my heart, these are my children, 78 children. And to do that, I needed a year for a lot of personal healing.
Something, you can't rush these things, can you? And you know, you're the vessel for this work to come through. It is like a birth. It's like an incubation period or an integration period.
Absolutely. I mean, it was quite a comical process writing them, less so for the creating the image, but every time I would write and I would connect to that depth of engagement, I'd practically black out. I would literally be at my kitchen table and I had some of the images on the wall in the kitchen, and I'd write a paragraph and I'd feel the potency of it, and then I go and my head would hit the kitchen table and I'd be out for about 15 minutes, and my dog got used to it when he's very sensitive to energies, and I laughed. I could maybe get through 2 paragraphs like boom. I thought, this is not practical. And then my body adjusted. That depth of connection requires a body. It's so important in the body for holding us stable. And so this all started again recently as I returned back to finishing the intro, and I finished the intro now. So the book is ready now, and there's going to be a journey from it ahead. We were talking earlier about the possibilities of this, that, and the other, and I'm making some very important choices now. But it's done. The work is complete in that respect, that it has the protocol. But one of the things I learned in writing the introduction was, in fact, what this actually supports with. So it works at the level practically, emotionally, passionately, and spiritually. And so with those 4 kind of cornerstones, it was a real relief. And that's what's made me, it's really touched me, especially with what happened the other day with this wonderful woman, to recognize the support at an emotional level for being with the image and the text. That doesn't require me to be there. Whenever I did the detail work with people, it was about our session there and then, and people were like, well, what happens now?
Yeah, so the Oracle can support after they go away.
Absolutely, and that makes me happier than anything. It's also good for me, because there is another way that I can put something out there that supports, that means that I don't have to be right there in every moment with it as it's unfolding, that there is something that kind of does the work. I have a remarkable friend, Honey Borden, who is in the States. She is a remarkable channel. She does work called Channeling the Masters, and she's an Arcturian star seed. She is seriously out there and brilliant. And she had a dream where the Fembot Oracle appeared, and we created a piece. I created a piece especially for her with 12 of them on there, and they accompany her on her travels where she does her work, and so it's on a big kind of thing that can pull out, and she has given me some incredible feedback as to what it has supported in the room. So I know that I don't see them as being, if you like, entities in and of themselves. They're
kind of portals, aren't
they? They are.
Yeah, otherworldly, definitely.
Damien, who we both know, is a very, very good friend of mine and an incredible peer. We do a lot of work with each other, and he is brilliant at seeing so much, and he's recognised beyond 12 dimensions of coding that are in them. I didn't think about that when I had my lights in my hand going, oh, draw this bit and draw that bit. No, this is what becomes available from that space beyond the structural, beyond the limits of what we think is possible or not possible. And so for me,
it's more than you could consciously comprehend, but I think it's through our feelings, really, our feelings and our sensation. When you look into your images, so much goes on a feeling level. It's incredible, and that's a reflection of you as well, because obviously the feeling and the movement and that side of it is very much one of your major gifts and qualities. So it's like when I was looking at it, like normally when I look into an image or something like that, I get a lot of visuals. I'm very predominantly quite visual or quite clairvoyant. But I was just, whoa, the energy coming through them. The first time I started looking, I was like, and I love the colours because they're almost like church windows. It's like a temple and then a portal, and then it takes you into, you can see beings in it, you can see other planets, other worlds. Gorgeous.
Thank you. I love that every time I look at them, I quite often forget that I made them. I mean, I did. I'm doing that. I did make them. They're me in a room with a camera, and I take ownership as an artist for the process. But I forget that when I look at them. I'm like quite enthralled. It's like I'm a kid looking at them for the first time, and I love that about it. I've done lots of other work. I do painting work and drawing work, and I don't forget that I did that drawing, and I can be critical of one element or another. But with these, they have life of their own.
They do.
I wouldn't say that they are entities, but they are somewhere in between, having their own
like a
energy.
Consciousness.
There is a consciousness, and some people have started to say that they've seen them appear to them prior to having seen them before. That really makes me happy. That they have entered into some kind of collective consciousness, and they're available in that respect. And so what's very exciting is that I wanted to, I'm very careful about the use of the word need. I wanted to have them solid, as them essentially a mother, father. I wanted them to be viable in the world, so to have a context in which they could be explored. So there's 5 protocols on how to use them, and if anyone is interested, I'll speak to you at home. If you go to the fembotoracle.com and put your email address in, then I send you all 5 videos of how to use them. So all the images are up there for free.
That's so lovely.
The texts aren't, in some capacity, and there's an app in the works so that people can apply the protocols with a device that's in their pocket. The practical side is really exciting. You can ask a question. So for those people that love divination, which I do, they're not often served in the fortune-telling world. If they want to empower themselves. They love divination, they want someone else to answer it for them. And there's a place for that. I'm not interested in that myself, but I understand that, and those that are genuine, that can do this. But for me, I'm interested in that overlap between those of us that want to cultivate our own deep intelligence, that own capacity to go beyond our cluttered mind into a much deeper knowing, and want support. So that's the overlap there. So practically there's one question, and there's only one question so far, which is, what is the best way to move forward in my exploration of? And it could be anything. It could be my relationship, it could be a party I'm organising, it could be profane, sacred, tiny, huge. But so I've been doing these sessions for over a year now, so people can also work with me if they want to do the session with me. I guide them through the process, I support them to drop into their deep intelligence, but they can do it by themselves. So on the website they have access to all the images to support them.
That's amazing.
And so the protocols are there. You can also ask for support. There's a protocol. The second protocol is, I just need support here and now. You may not even have anything in mind. You're either overwhelmed or there's an incredible opportunity there, and you want support now. So there's a protocol for having the Fembot Oracle support that. There's also a protocol for those of us that we're under emotional challenge. There is circumstance in our life perhaps that is really triggering powerful emotional challenge, pain, disturbance, heaviness. And yet we don't want to be fixed. We don't want it taken away. We don't want it to be numbed or oppressed. We want to cultivate the capacity as alchemists to open it, to explore it, and transmute it. So the Fembot Oracle supports that directly. And as I said, if you put your email in and I send you the protocol videos, they're all there for you to do this yourself. So it's completely for free. That was important to me, that they were a gift to the world. I'm obviously an artist and I need to obviously create my own abundance, but I knew the images needed to be out there.
So and it's part of the flow too, so it's like the more you put out, the more you receive as well. It's beautiful. I love that.
There's no scarcity at all with that, but I want people to be able to have access to them wherever they are in the world. So the third thing, which in a way, so if we're looking at the practical and the emotional, the next kind of layer of what's possible in life that really speaks to me as a spiritual practitioner, as a teacher that wants to support people to how to engage with depth, is living life passionately, living it wildly, living it with curiosity and with adventure. That so many of us, especially in the spiritual world, our lives become quite dry. We become very serious, and we feel that that side of life is maybe in my past, or it's for those that are a little bit more materialistic, when in fact the possibilities of deep pleasure, deep adventure are even more available to us. There are so many so-called hedonists out there that they are terrified of pleasure. They are perpetually numbing in order to not feel. So for those of us that have done the work to come into this deep freedom that comes with emotional alchemy, we have the possibility of being able to really hold life as precious, sacred, and deeply passionate. But to do that, we need to balance that with alignment, with integrity, with stability, with nurture. So the fourth protocol, which is called Deep Adventure, uses a cluster of 7 that are really the wild ones, with 7 that really get the stability. So it's not either or. And then the final one is about integration. So it supports at a spiritual level what I call deep integration. So working with the 3 aspects that we talked about earlier, and how they can integrate, because in fact the Fembot Oracle is a map of the 3 aspects. And the fourth one.
It's the 3 into 1, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's beautiful.
And so the diamond suit is a way. So I'm naturally biased in the second aspect. So spontaneity and playfulness and creativity. So I have a slight aversion to structure and also to stillness. And over the years I've got a little bit better with both. So I would work with the pieces suit if I wanted to bring more structure. Or I'd work with the light suit if I wanted to bring more stillness. And so working down the line of the suits through all the different major archetypes as they're expressed is a really great way to bring that into balance. And the great thing is that when we do integrate, it's so much greater than the sum of the parts. We don't have to block off entire realms and reams of our life that otherwise would be either inconsequential or, oh no, that doesn't matter that bit, who needs stillness, I'm wild, and that. It's like, no, all of this supports it. For me, the second aspect bias, craft gives me traction. You can have a million great ideas, but that sense of frustration and being a fraud when you don't have the craft, and then the stillness that gives it infinite possibility. And there's a profound confidence that comes through when we can connect to stillness at no expense to the actual spontaneity of the creativity. I think we fear that we'll betray our team if we were to branch out. And so I want to support us all in being able to realize that as spiritual beings, we absolutely have a place in the world. And in fact, we owe it to ourselves to give traction, to give sustainability. Whether it be artists or sensitives, there are so many awful adjectives that accompany that. If you think artist, you don't think vibrant, healthy. We think starving,
poor,
suffering. All the stories from Whitney to Jackson Pollock to Charlie Parker of the ODing
the struggle of the artist,
and the pain and the addiction and all of that.
Rather than just the simple joy and pleasure that you get out of it, without the need to be someone or something alongside it.
Exactly. And so the possibility that we could also, as very sensitive beings, cultivate sustainability, nurture, balance, at no expense to any of the wildness. I've had so many ridiculous opinions out there that somehow addiction fuels the artist. Absolute rubbish. It totally destabilizes that which could go even deeper. In the same way that drug use does. People can say, oh my God, I got to connect with this and this. Goes, no, you didn't.
Oh honey, seriously, who needs drugs when you've got that connection?
And the ego is present, so the ego can watch it. Because whenever you drug the ego in any which way, whether it's trance or that, once it comes back on, it's not a happy bunny. It's like, no, whatever just happened, the opposite. And so with detail, one of the things I love most about it as a body of work is that the ego is fully present, as ordinary as this. Not that this is ordinary, it's extraordinary, but that sense of the grounded. If the ego can remain present, albeit quieter, then it doesn't freak out once it finishes. It goes, okay.
Just observing.
Just another day. And so it can integrate it into the place it needs integration, which is the everyday world. Sex, relationship, food, money. That's where we need to bring it. Thousands of years we've been able to piss off up mountains and go all blissed out.
Oh, Damien and I had this same chat earlier. It's so true, isn't
it's not a big
We need to live in this world.
Absolutely. That's the challenge for us as 21st century sages. Can we bring it here? I think it was Ram Dass that said, if you think you're enlightened, spend a weekend with your parents. And so to be able to bring everything that we've acquired supposedly in the ashram or wherever it might be on that great yoga retreat and say, and here too.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, if we can't bring it here too, I'm not that impressed, to be
No.
honest. I think Satori is not that rare a thing. If you're going to dedicate your life in a monastery, then I think it's kind of been there, done that,
Yeah.
for many of us in many lifetimes. So for those of us that are incarnating now to say, yeah, I want to bring it on the underground, I want to bring it in the context of infidelity, if we're experiencing deep loss or deep suffering or whatever it might be, or the breakdown of a financial structure that we were dependent upon in order to move through. Where do I find that resourcefulness? Where do I find that creativity? Where do I find that resilience? Where do I find that relationship with both gratitude and incredible boundaries? Where do I find all of that in the real world? That's what excites me. And then as a community, as we cultivate and support this in each other, we don't have to feel anymore we have to choose this or that, the gross, the subtle, or the causal. Whatever those choices were, that was in the past. We don't have to do that anymore. And that's what's so exciting about being able to have this conversation with you and see your work and what you're putting out there and the community that's being built. This is something that really is needed, especially in these crazy times.
Oh,
to find this anchoring.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the point of it, is to kind of make these conversations accessible, and that there's no topic that is off limits, and I don't want to have to watch, oh, how weird my language is or anything like that. As long as we can try to come some way to explaining what it's all about, then that's a step in the right direction, isn't it? Helping people to normalize these conversations, or normalize having these conversations,
Absolutely.
Questioning everything, broadening our horizons, expanding our consciousness, expanding our knowledge. And if there's something you don't know about, then what is it? Why? Being curious about what's really going on, I think, is...
And not at the expense of discernment.
No.
Not at the expense of... We don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater to do this.
Be discerning is absolutely part of it.
Grounded, discerning, judicious, a sense of humour. We were saying this earlier.
Yeah.
Just
If something doesn't resonate with you, back away.
Absolutely.
If something does, go for it.
And you've got to laugh as well.
Yeah.
You've got to keep all these faculties that we probably would apply to whether or not we took someone else seriously in their field. Do they have a good sense of humour about themselves? Are they able to kind of question rather than so much dogma? And just because
You've got
we
to
are...
laugh at yourself, you really do.
It's
We were talking
fundamental.
about light language before, weren't we? We were talking about, oh God, can you imagine?
And just the giggle that has to be allowed to come through. And
I always
those...
tell my clients, you laugh because it sounds bonkers.
Absolutely.
It absolutely sounds nuts. When I'm doing it, I feel like, what on earth is going on here? This must sound ridiculous. But you kind of lose yourself in it. You just open to the realms of something else. It's just beautiful.
And it's playful as well, to be able to laugh at this.
Yeah.
I remember something I read a long time ago by Ken Wilber, brilliant theorist. He calls the pre-transvalency. So if you've got conventional thinking, there is something that was before conventional thinking in a regressive way that would have superstition. That's the pre-conventional. So all the stuff that's filled with all kinds of nonsense and superstition and dogma. And then there's where we are, the post-conventional. So the thing that's ahead of convention, that will one day be conventional, they have one thing in common, the pre-conventional and the post-conventional, is that they're both not conventional. But the problem is they get lumped together by convention, when in fact we have nothing in common other than the fact we're not conventional. So I think conversations like this, because he calls it the pre-trans fallacy, because the trans-conventional, the pre-conventional, he says we've got to learn to distinguish between the archaic, superstitious nonsense and that which is genuinely groundbreaking, that will one day be convention.
Yeah.
Because the convention judges us both the same. They both go,
Yeah.
you're all just not convention.
Yeah.
And so we get stuck in the same boat. And the pre-conventional gets raised in the New Age especially to the level of being progressive.
Yeah.
And by the rationalists, they lower our stuff to being superstitious.
Yeah.
So I think it's so important for these conversations to take place so we can actually discern using all of our intelligences. Because that's what the heart's intelligence is.
Is it taking me forward? Is it taking me back? Is it,
We don't have to cut off from rational or linear intelligence.
No.
The heart's intelligence, deep intelligence, includes and transcends that. It includes the somatic intelligence, gut intelligence, the soul's overview.
Yeah.
So that's the thing which I'm so excited about. And that's what I'm dedicated to supporting, is deep intelligence.
That's it. We have more than one brain, don't we? We have
Absolutely.
plenty of brains in this body. With a heart is a brain of its own, the stomach is a brain, the womb is a brain, the skin,
Absolutely.
the touch, our senses. You know, your sense of smell. I mean, you taste with your nose. I learned from the real life Willy Wonka the other day. You actually taste with your nose before you taste with your mouth, and that that is so similar to when you walk in a room and you feel the energy before you actually see what's going
Absolutely.
on. I did a perfume course the other day, right? And we got to smell 25 different pure scents, right? We were going around. And it was interesting because she didn't tell us what we were smelling before we smelt it. And the minute you cut your brain off from knowing what it is, and you just let your sense of smell, it's the same with your intuition or anything. We all smelt one, and every single person went, oh my God, this is beautiful, and it's so familiar, but it doesn't actually smell like anything I know, and it's got so many layers to it. It was rose.
Right.
And when you smell rose without knowing it's rose, it is so multifaceted. It's extraordinary. So it's like we let go of labels or expectations or the rational part of stuff. That's where we get into the depth of everything. So I love
Absolutely.
it. Anyway, we can talk forever.
We couldn't we?
We've been talking for over an hour. So I just want to remind people, can you just remind people what your website is, honey, so they know how to get hold of you?
So for the Fembot Oracle, it's THE, the Fembot, Fembot, and then Oracle, ORACLE. Perhaps there'll be a link.
And is it .com?
.com, yes. So the Fembot Oracle.
There will be a link below, yeah.
Everything there that's Fembot Oracle related. And then I'm Stephen Morallee, so there's stephenmorallee.com. And those are the two main sites. There's 3aspect.com as well, and there's so many.
I'll put them all. And you're on Instagram and
on
everything
Instagram,
as well.
Stephen Morallee and the Fembot Oracle. There's two strong and 3aspect photography. So there's a good little scattering out there.
I want to come and see you perform as well.
That would be fantastic.
I
would
come
love
and
that
check
very
you
much.
out, baby. Amazing. Well, listen, Stephen, thank you so much for talking to me today. What an amazing interview, conversation, and so much to think about. And I'm going to go online and sign up and get all the I want to start working with your images. So, and just to any parting words for our viewers before we go?
I have the sense that if you're watching this, there is already that community that's been established between the three of us two and you. And so to acknowledge that depth of connection that you've been hungry for is really a privilege to be part of that. So I can sense this community that we are all fostering, where we don't have to be in this either or energy anymore, and we're ready to break through. And we might have felt alone, and so I just want to acknowledge you, and I want to acknowledge all the ways that I've been supported, and that I look forward to the next, 80 years of doing this. And very excited. So thank you.
Thank you. Oh. And for those of you out there, thank you so much for watching and supporting the Alexandra Wenman Show.